tady přivítat na naší přednášce o moderním webovém vývoji v Javě. Chtěla bych vám představit společnost Madeo, potažmo tedy BrandMaster, ze kterého tak nějak pocházím a kterou tuto firmu v tomto kontextu zastupuji. Úvodní část budu mít na starosti já, protože nějak pocházím z pozice HR a marketing specialisty, takže vám něco řeknu o Madeu a potom se přesuneme k té důležitější části ještě, a to je, proč tady jsme se dneska potkali, a to je kvůli panu Hansu Christianu Granumu, který vám něco poví už z toho odborného hlediska. Takže my jsme za vámi přijeli ze Zlína. Zlín je kousíček od tady, má to 1,5 hodiny cesty, teď to mám za sebou čerstvě tu jízdu. Ačkoliv je Zlín docela malé město, v tom měřítku máme kolem 85 000 obyvatel, tak se snažíme našim zaměstnancům nebo prostě lidem v našem okolí nabídnout kvalitní zázemí a prostě zajímavé projekty. O tom se budeme bavit později. To je nějaký přehled o tom, jak to vypadá u nás v kanceláři. Teď jsme otevřeli další patro a vypadá to, že budeme otvírat co nevidět další. Takže rosteme a plány máme ve Zlíně velké. Chtěla jsem vám ukázat, jak to ve Zlíně vypadá. Jsme krásné město, jsme hlavně krásné město pro život a pro založení rodiny. Takže až se jednoho krásného dne rozhodnete, že byste se chtěli přestěhovat třeba do České republiky, tak Zlín je možná jedno z měst, které by vás mohlo zajímat. Je tam spousta zeleně, krásných domečků a myslím si, že kulturní vyžití tam taky nějaké. Co vám chtěla jen ukázat, kde teda se nacházíme. Je to opravdu blízko od hranic, kde dál. Dívejte si, sedněte si. A tady dál. Tady je taková ta klasická takový ten klasický machrovací slide, kde se snažíme říct, že nejsme úplně nováčci a že za sebou máme nějaké úspěchy, nicméně všechno bereme s pokorou, ale jsme na to samozřejmě náležitě hrdí, ale jak říkám, s tou pokorou. Takže nějaké ocenění za sebou máme. No a v loňském roce jsme se vlastně stali součástí norské společnosti BrandMaster. Po nějaké dlouholeté spolupráci, která z obou stran dávala smysl, tak jsme se rozhodli, že bude dobrý krok skočit do toho s nějakými dalšími vizemi. Takže společně s BrandMasterem se teďka snažíme ve Zlíně vybudovat vývojové centrum. Nejsme tedy jen ve Zlíně, znamená to, že jsme i v ostatních městech po celé Evropě a letos v létě budeme pravděpodobně otvírat pobočku v Londýně. Takže je možnost se prostě podívat v rámci nějakých pracovních cest do Norska, do Švédska, pak i do Anglie, tak dále. Tak, abyste si dokázali představit, jak jsme velicí, ve Zlíně je nás kolem 20, každý měsíc rosteme průměrně o 1,5 člověka, takže to, že jsme před rokem byli nějací, tak teď už jsme zase někde jinde. Nicméně dohromady s BrandMasterem je nás 72, takže to číslo už v tuto chvíli asi není úplně aktuální, myslím si, že už se zase k nám někdo přidal. Máme za sebou nějakých 5 akvizic a jsme na trhu už více než 10 let. MRM. Víte někdo, co to znamená? Já jsem si skoro jistá, že netušíte. Protože IT svět je plný takových těch různých zkratek a tak dále, takže když jsem poprvé viděla tuto zkratku, tak jsem vůbec netušila. Tady mám k tomu nějakou vysvětlivku a jsem si skoro 100% jistá, že vám to opět nic neřekne, takže vám to ještě jednou vysvětlím. Co my děláme? My pomáháme velkým marketingovým týmům v jejich aktivitách. Pomáháme jim řídit jejich procesy a pomáháme jim usnadňovat jejich práci a hlavně automatizovat. Je toho spousta o nás, co ještě říct, ale já to vůbec nechci natahovat. Koho by to zajímalo, tak určitě najde informace na stránkách BrandMasteru, v sekci produkty. Důležité je říct, že my máme vlastní produkty a že tyto produkty společně vyvíjíme a posuneme dál. Takže není to, kdo se už trošku orientuje v praxi, tak máme buď projektový vývoj nebo produktový vývoj, my se soustředíme hodně na ten produktový. Má to své výhody a to v tom, že prostě máte spoustu tak nějak možností, nečekáte na nějaké deadline nebo nestíháte nějaké deadline, je to takové klidnější, systematičtější a můžete mít vlastně v našem týmu dost velké slovo v tom, jak ten konečný produkt bude vypadat, protože nás není ještě tolik. Nejsme úplný korporát, ale pracujeme pro korporáty, pracujeme pro velké mezinárodní firmy. Někteří z našich klientů, Mercedes-Benz, Coca-cola, další různé norsko-švédské firmy. Kdybyste byli někdy v Norsku nebo Švédsku, tak když byste opíte z letadla, tak vidíte spoustu těch lov. Všechno to jsou obří firmy, kterým pomáhají naše produkty řídit marketingové procesy. Další značky, které vám určitě něco řeknou. Znáte někdo Kigo, DJ? Jste DJ, jste posluchači takovéto hudby, asi úplně ne. Každopádně, že je známější než Avicii, ale tak pro něho teďka taky čerstvě děláme. Aby to nebyla taková nuda, abych vám něco ukázala i z toho, co opravdu děláme, tak toto je vlastně ukázka naší práce. Mercedes-Benz prostě funguje na našich systémech, toto je nějaká vizualizace jednoduchá, abyste si dokázali představit, jak to círka jakoby vypadá. Nicméně ty systémy jsou velmi robustní a velmi složité, takže to je na jednu přednášku a na trošku déle. Asi zajímavé čísla pro vás. A tento obrázek je zajímavý z toho důvodu, že je vlastně automaticky vygenerován naším systémem, nebo naším jedním z produktů. Takže to, že jsem říkala, že vlastně pomáháme marketingovým týmům automatizovat, tak toto je vlastně ukázka toho automatického procesu. Na tomto se vůbec nepodílel grafik, jenom v původním návrhu. To je další z našich nějakých ukázek. Circle K je obří řetězec, který je spíše známý v Americe. Myslím si, že všude jinde po světě než u nás. Každopádně možná se tady za chvíli někdy objeví. Zajímavé určitě je, že vlastně Circle K kompletně je na našich produktech a systémech a možná zajímavé číslo, že mají 180 000 zaměstnanců a to všechno nějak koordinujeme. Tak, and now it's my pleasure to invite him here, Hans Christiana Granum, who is a senior developer in BrandMaster company. So, your turn now.
Thanks, Elisa. Right, so my name is Hans Christiana Granum. And as Denisa told you, I work as a programmer in BrandMaster. Been working with development for about 15 years, 4 years in BrandMaster, and before that for some consultant company in Norway. So, why in the world would you want to be the Java programmer, right? The language is 20 years old. It has a reputation for being slow. You have to write a whole lot of words for every little thing. You can create a Hello World program that is like tens of classes. The point is that Java has sort of gotten a reputation for being old-fashioned, and I want to tell you a story. In Norway, the banking system chose to implement the login for all the online banks with a Java applet. This was like 10 years ago, 15 years ago or something. So if you wanted to log into a bank in Norway, you had to download the Java plugin, which was many megabytes large. This was back when we dialed up on ISDN lines, right? And every single time you wanted to log into your bank, there was of course a security update, so you had to download it again. And people struggled with this all the time. So when I told people that I was a Java developer, it was really sort of a bad word in Norwegian. People didn't have the best associations with Java at all. So this is not the world I work in, right? Java, of course, in the browser, in the plugin, the applet, that's dead. Java on the server side is living and breathing, and the TIOB index, which is a page that measures popularity in programming languages, has Java on its top. The Stack Overflow developer survey this year shows Java like the second most popular language, only surpassed by JavaScript and the other technologies that aren't programming languages. So no, Java isn't dead. Java has its place on the server side. It's fast. With the coming with new Java 8 stuff, and now Java 9, and suddenly 10 has also come. Java as a programming language has got modern features which enables you to develop it in well, like a modern way. So this is why you want to be Java programmers, because it's not a dead language. Java is used by the biggest companies in the world. Google is a great contributor to the Java ecosystem. Netflix has released a whole bunch of great open source libraries and projects that you can take advantage of. One of the most popular games in the world is created in Java. Might not have been a good idea, but okay, it was. So what I would like you to sort of get out of this is a sense of what it is to work with programming. Because I remember when I was studying, we got a lot of theoretical input, but didn't really get a sense of what people were actually doing out there, because we're not sitting just writing code all the day. Probably one of the most important skills as a programmer is good communication skills. You need to talk to people, need to find out what they want, and you need to find out what they really want, not just what they say that they want, right? So I'll show you or go through the different phases in development, and sort of round off with showing you a small real-world web application or web backend. So most development starts with someone having a problem, right? It can be your customer having a problem. It can be your own problem that you have in your daily life and need to find some solution for. So when it comes to customers, it's often like they come to you with the solution very often. They say to you, can you make this? And this is meant to solve a problem. You then need to try to find out what problem they are trying to solve with the thing they ask you to make, because it may not be the best way to solve that problem. So you need to talk to them, figure out what are you really trying to achieve here. Maybe you can create a more general solution that will work better for both this customer and your system. So that's sort of the problem stage. Then you get the idea. Okay, I want to do something. So I thought, okay, real world example. I have a problem for this lecture right now. I'm going to hold a lecture. I've promised to sort of create a web app. So this is my problem. So then I have to brainstorm ideas for what we are going to do. So one thing is that this has to be reasonably short to make if I'm going to actually make something during a lecture. And sort of one idea I had was that I could try to create a web app that gives you, the students, the possibility to bring up a web page and give me feedback on the lecture, for example. So that's an idea I had. Sort of like there's a Norwegian company that creates a product called Kahoot, which is sort of a quiz app. So that's where that came from. I don't know if any of you have heard of it, Kahoot. It's supposed to be one of the more successful apps coming from Norway, but maybe not too successful if no one has heard of it, right? We don't have too many of those. Go back. So when you then had the idea, you need to sort of go through, brainstorm everything about this and find out your requirements. Just let me take a quick look here. Yeah, so you need to sort of try to crystallize out what the specific tasks this idea are going to achieve and who are going to use it. Do you have specific roles? Do you, for example, have an administrator role? Do you have a user role? So you need to just try to see your product from every angle and find out what specific requirements there are for it. And you also need to then communicate with the different, what we call stakeholders, the customer, the maybe end users, your own team, and this sort of illustrates what can go wrong if the communication aren't really in place. That the customer comes with you, there he has actually come with that solution that I talked about, which is obviously not what should be really made, because who needs a swing with 3 levels, and then someone has interpreted it this way, someone interpreted it that way. So if you start by gathering the requirements and communicating with every stakeholder, then there should be some sort of agreement at last of what you are going to make. So I thought that for my app, at least we can start with defining the roles we need. We have like an end user role for you students and sort of an administrator role for me. What we like to do is to start to create also a common language for the requirements in the app, which as we call sort of domain language. So in this specific case, I would call the end user role, I would say that that is a student role, and the administrator role, we can call that the lecturer role, because then we are starting to define a language which is very specific for this app, this situation we are in now. But we are also then able to communicate with each other when we define this common language, and we can then be more specific about what this app is going to contain of functionality, rather than using general terms like what is an administrator and what's an end user. Like in this part we say student, we say lecturer, and the requirements for this app will be like the student role should be able to register a nickname, for example, should be able to answer questions. The lecturer role should be able to create the questions, define the answers, define maybe the time configured to answer the questions. Should be able to show the questions on a screen, maybe show the results, review the answers later. So these are then the requirements for the app. The next phase then, wait just a minute. And that's sort of taking these requirements and creating specifications. We like to divide them up in what we call user stories, which is a short, specific sentence that describes a single piece of functionality. We then use usually the form of as a role, I want some kind of functionality to achieve, or because of some reason. For example, then, when do we name our product? I'm just sort of interjecting this, because there's really no well-defined time to create the name of our product. Sometimes, well, you sort of want to do it at least before you start programming, or actually it's part of the domain language, right? You need to create a terminology for the thing you're going to make, so you need to call it something. If it's going to be a public-facing product, it might be too early. Marketing maybe want to hold on that until you see what is created, right? Then, of course, you can use some code name for it, like I know that Windows 95 in its days were called Project Chicago, so yeah. I was just, does everyone understand the sort of concept for this quiz app we were trying to make now? And do you have any suggestions for the name? Yeah, no, I thought of voter without the E would be sort of, it's like very Web 2-ish, never have all the consonants. So voter, that's something we can call it. But back to the specifications. So for our requirements, we can then create this set of user stories. As a student, I want to register my nickname so that I'm able to answer questions. So that is sort of, yeah, first the role, then what you want to do, and then what will happen after. Right? As a student, I want to answer a question, so that the result is saved for retrieval. the last part is not always apparent. Sometimes it's like, as a student, I want to answer a question because that is what the app should do, or that is what we were told. Yeah, but there is always a reason for it. So try to sort of get that in there. Yeah, as a lecturer, I want to register a question and possible answers, so that the students have something to answer. Sometimes you are not able, or a user story has some condition to it which need to be achieved first. So you can you do that in two different ways. You can add a clause to the user story, which I did in the first as a student, having already logged in. I want to answer a question, so the questions are later saved for retrieval. Or you can just mark it as the precondition for this user story is that the user is already logged in. The user student is registered and logged in. That will be then a different user story, which this sort of refers to. So when you have defined all your requirements for the app, at least in Modeo and BrandMaster, we then have designers that start working on the look of the app. I didn't have access to any designers, so I did this myself. That's why it doesn't look better. But yeah, you will have designers that try to make it beautiful, try to make it functional, which is the most important pieces of this app. So for this one, I thought, yeah, login page. You should have sort of a place where you're waiting for the next question, and then a place where you can answer these questions. And for the admin page, sorry, for the lecturer page, right? A login and then a place where you can add questions, see who is participating, start the quiz, of course, and then show the question on the screen and show the results afterwards. So that's sort of the preparations you need to do before you start programming. Then you come to the actual programming, and there's sort of different views on what the most important skills are for programmers, right? Is it enough to create code that's working? Should you try to create compact code, like writing the most functionality in the smallest amount of lines? Is it most important that it's as fast as possible? Well, in my opinion, the most important thing is that anyone can read it. I, as not the most clever programmer in the world, if I can read your code, if I can understand what at least you're trying to do, then I can also go in and maybe fix it. If your code is too complicated for me to understand, then I don't even understand what the logic of what you're trying to do is, and then I don't have any chance to try to fix it. And you must remember that you will always be working in teams. It might not be you that will maintain your own code. It might be a different guy. You might even have left the company 3 years ago when they find a bug in your code that someone else needs to fix. So you need to make sure that it's simple and easy to understand, really, before you think about optimizing it for speed and trying to do clever things. Robert C. Martin, or Uncle Bob, as he likes to call himself, has written this book. It's a couple of years old now, but it's really still one of the best tips for learning how to write readable code. So if you haven't heard of that before, I really recommend it, and if you have, then very good. This is what I just said, wasn't it? So when we're talking, first of all, web programming, I think, must stand for like 90% of what happens of development out there today. It's really about having the user interface out on the web and interacting with it. So almost any sort of program you'll make will probably have a web front end. That's a little bit generalized, but I think there's a lot of web programming, and modern web programming is like HTML and JavaScript in the front end, interfacing with back-end services via REST APIs or similar. So that's where we sort of are as Java developers. We're in the back end coding for an HTML front end. And I don't you remember this guy, this hairdo at least in the USA, they called it like business up front, party in the back, where everything grows wild. So I sort of thought of modern web programming like the other way, like the reverse mullet. You have a party up front and business in the back where we work. The party is more like the JavaScript world is crazy, right? You have all these new libraries coming every week. You have to sort of reverse to a new sort of way to think every week, and you deal with animations and colors and flash and so. We do the real work in the back end where we do real programs, right? I want to say a little bit about tooling, because it's important to sort of, well, Java ecosystem is of course 20 years old, so you have a lot of tools to choose from. It's important to not use everything, but find what you are comfortable with, find the right tools for the job you are going to do, and learn them good. If you, well, first of all, use an IDE. We don't write code in a text editor anymore. I'll get a little bit back to why, but whether you choose an IntelliJ IDE or Eclipse or something else, you should invest some time in learning it good, learning the shortcuts, learning to be productive with that tool. Source control is the same. I think of this that Git has won the race, but try to invest some time also in understanding how Git works, how you will always be faced with some difficulties when merging branches together and stuff like that, and learn how to solve these conflicts, learn how to merge. I'm not saying you necessarily need to learn all commands, but if you like to work on the command line, you can do that as well, but there are also graphical tools that help you a bit. But anyway, learning how it works and what's the philosophy behind it is reasonably important. In BrandMaster, we also use other tools, Bamboo for continuous integration for build as a build server. It builds and tests and deploys our product. You can use Jenkins. We have sort of invested in the Atlassian stack, so we use Bamboo. We use Bitbucket as a Git repository server. We use Jira as our bug tracking tool, and we use Confluence for documentation. A little bit about why first of all you need to use an IDE is because the IDE compiles the code in the background for you, so you get instant feedback if there are some small syntax errors, right? Back in the days where when we started with Java, we maybe wrote at least one class, maybe several classes, and then we compiled. And if we had missed a semicolon, we didn't get any feedback on that until then. So it would take maybe several minutes until we realized that we had just made a tiny mistake. It's important to try to get as fast as possible feedback on the changes you do. So the faster feedback you get, the more productive you will be, and the less the cost of the bug fix or the change is. So the IDE is sort of the fastest possible feedback. You get almost instant feedback on some of the changes, but of course it doesn't affect all types of mistakes you can have. It only affects syntax errors or compilation errors. So if you have some logical error, then you need to implement unit tests and run those at least before a commit, but also maybe regularly, maybe even continuously while you're working, so that you are confident that your logic is good, that you're not breaking any tests and code from different parts, other parts of the system while you're doing it. And of course, unit tests also is a way of getting feedback fast. So the next step then is then to run the program, run the server, start it, and checking your logic in the actual system. That's a process that can take several minutes. With modern frameworks, we're going to look a little bit at Spring Boot. But also there's a library called Drop Wizard, which embeds the application server within the application, and also is focused on fast startup. You do get to start the application a little bit faster than traditionally. So maybe this step sort of has gone from minutes, and now maybe it takes seconds, but it's still faster to solve your issues with the unit tests than with testing in the actual application. And also the next step is when you check in your code and your CI server builds it, runs the unit tests, deploys it. That will also give you some feedback on whether you have maybe broken some integration tests that you didn't test yourself. But that's a process that can take minutes or hours. So again, any problems you can solve before you come to that step, it's better. And of course, then you have your test people that goes into the application and tests it. That can be like hours or days after you have made the change. So any problems they find will take even longer for you to fix. And if they miss something and stuff gets into production and it's your customers that tests it and reports feedback on it, bugs for example, then it might be weeks since you last worked on it and it will take longer and longer to solve. So it's important to try to have a way to get feedback on your changes as fast as possible. And of course, having good unit tests is the best way there. So this is just an illustration that shows that for each phase, if a bug, let's say a bug, comes through to these different phases, it will just cost more to fix. It will be more people involved. You will have forgotten what you were doing at the moment you fixed it, and you will need to backtrack your steps. Or, as I said, maybe it's a different person that tries to fix it. And of course, there's a whole lot of libraries to choose from. It's not as crazy as the JavaScript world, but of course, it's important also in the Java ecosystem to select the correct libraries for the correct job. It's important to make sure that the libraries you choose are stable, are mature, are reasonably popular among other Java developers. That's sort of to make sure that your team doesn't work on something that is very obscure, very peripheral, so that new people coming into the team maybe already have some knowledge about it if you use popular frameworks. Also, on the application server side, there's a whole lot of stuff to choose from. Tomcat and Jetty has been sort of the lightweight application server up until now. Widefly or JBoss, as we use, are sort of the enterprise server versions. And the last two, Dropwizard and Spring Boot, are the one I talked about, which are trying to do a little bit more lightweight approach, trying to be embed the application server. So Dropwizard embeds Jetty server, and Spring Boot by default embeds a Tomcat server, but can also embed the Jetty server. But it does it in a way that, yeah, it's more efficient, shorter startup time, and better feedback. So a point of then using some of these frameworks is to not reinvent the wheel, not do your own JSON serialization, for example, because there already exist libraries for it. So use those where you need it. Use Jackson, use JSON if you're going to serve REST endpoints, use Jersey or Spring. And if you don't really want to write your own SQL, you can use Hibernate or other ORM libraries. So, yeah, now I want to sort of try to create. I found out that this web application that I was outlining was much too ambitious for a session like this. But I'll start on the back end, try to create a couple of REST endpoints just to give you a feel of how we can do this in Java. So just give me a second here to do that. I think I'll just have to start up my ID and oh, that's big. Yeah, so we're going to start a new project. We are going to use this Spring Boot application that I was talking about. It's sort of, what it does, it has taken a lot of decisions for you. So you sort of are then stuck in this Spring world, which has its own conventions, has its own style, but then it also gives you a lot for free. And you'll show that because of how sort of fast we can create like a JSON endpoint for an application. So I will start by defining some names. We're going to call it voter, right? The other stuff I think is okay. And here you sort of choose the Spring components you want to use in the application. So this is going to be a web application, so we'll include the web Spring dependency. I'm going to include Lombok, which I'm going to talk a little bit about, which is, I'll get back to that. And we also need some persistence. So I include the JPA and the H2 embedded database. Yeah, so we'll just wait for it to import all the libraries. It's downloading now a whole lot of stuff. And we get the outline of the application here. So it's still running here, down here. Finished. Okay, so we have this application. We need to then define some sort of endpoint. So we'll add that as, I guess, what we call a REST controller. So here we can add a class, call it controllers, and we'll add a controller for retrieving and adding the questions in our app. So we call it question controller. So this needs to be then annotated with the REST controller annotation, and this tells then the application that these classes are going to provide the REST endpoints for our application. So this is one of the things that Spring Boot gives you, is like some sort of magic behind here that you don't have to think about yourself. Of course, if you are going to use this much, you need to understand what it does, but yeah, so when I provide mapping here, it will say that the URL of this endpoint is going to be /questions. And we say that this should then return a list of questions. And yeah, so let's define the question class. We can add that in a package we call model, for example. And the question needs to let's do it like this. The question needs to have I'll call it a topic. I'll just say that, well, we're going to add an ID because we said we were going to store it in a database, so we'll need that. I'll just add, because we sort of already have defined that each question should have 4 answers, or at least in my mind I have done that, so I'll just add 4 separate strings for that. So private string, I'll call it alternative 1 to 4. Now, normally in Java, you need to expose these as with getters and setters. So I would maybe do something like this and have the idea generate the getters and setters for me. I don't feel that this adds a lot to the readability of the code. It's just like, okay, we have a property and we need to have the getters and setters, but it's sort of actually boilerplate code. And this is where the Lombok plugin or library comes in. It has a set of annotations that generates these things for you. So I can use the data annotation here. And then Lombok actually compiles getters and setters into the classes, but it doesn't need to show in the source code, so the code gets more readable. Of course, the data annotation exposes all private variables as with getters and setters, so you need to be sure that that is what you actually want. It also creates a default constructor equals code and hash equals and hash code, I think. So you need to know about what this does in the background, but if you're happy with that, then this is a simple way to do that. If you don't want all the extra stuff that the data annotation gives you, you can also go, for example, on each property and define that the alternative one should have a getter, and it will generate the getter and nothing more. But for this, I'll use the data annotation. And like that. I'll rename this to something that is spelled right. Refactor, rename. Is that correct? Yes. And we'll import this class. Yeah. So this function should then try to retrieve whatever questions we have stored in a database. So we'll add a repository for that and use the ORM to fetch that for us. So what we want to have here is we'll create the repository. What does it complain about otherwise? It's the name of the file, probably. Sorry? Where? Yeah, you're right. So we'll wait with that. Because I'm going to create my repository first. So repository dot where? There. Like this. And let me see. We are going to, this is first of all going to be an interface, and we're going to extend a CRUD repository. So it already contains common methods for finding and adding objects. Like this. So this should then already have a method that we could use. So what we need now is we need to sort of tell Spring Boot that we want access to that repository from this class. We're going to let it inject that repository into this controller. Auto wired is another magic feature that does this. And we'll say something like, yeah, just define it here. Question repository. So this auto-wired says to Spring, find me this class and instantiate it and just give me access to it here. And then this method should be able to do a repository find all return. And find all returns an iterable instead of list. So just not to mess with that, we'll say that we are returning an iterable here. So let's also add a method for adding a question, posting a question. So we'll do the request mapping. We'll say that is just question. And we'll state that the method is post. There we are. And we'll call that, we'll return the question that you're adding. Add question request body will then, how did that work? Good? No? Yeah? Okay. Body. So this will then, still something wrong. I have to, Sorry?
Why did you change question repository from general type question type into question?
Yeah. But this, what does it say? It doesn't this mean that it should return? There must be something. Yeah. I think, yeah, I missed something here. You define the repository to be of a type. So you say that the CRUD repository should take questions and also I think this is the ID, type of the ID. So if we go back to that, should be okay again now. Yeah. So it didn't know what type it were going to get back. Yeah, so this means that you can pass the JSON for the question object in the body of the post, and then the Jackson library will automatically serialize that to a Java object, which you can then use further in the code. So, if I'm not completely mistaken, I think this should be enough to run a small test now. So there was an error which it says error creating bean by with name question repository, not a managed type. So there's something wrong with my auto wiring. Yeah, well, yeah, I skipped a step. We have to define, we didn't say that, we didn't prepare our objects for being stored in the database with this, this automatic functionality in the repository. So we have to, where's my, in addition to this, we also have to annotate it as an entity that makes the JPA know that it's possible to store in the database. We'll add, we just let it know that this is the ID field, that the ID should be generated for us. Yeah, it has a type of hint of how to generate it. Generation. Generation type auto. Import class, strategy. Let's see if that was enough. If it was that I complained about. Now it's running. It's running on port 8080. So this means that I should be able now to, I'll pull up Postman to try to interact with this API. I'll open a new one here. So first of all, we can try to get the existing. So we are on localhost 8080 questions and see if we get anything in return here. No response. Sorry? But this is a new protocol. It's HTTP. So where are our results? It should be possible to bring this. Wait a minute. I'll take this over to the other side just a little bit to well, I thought I should be able to adjust it a little bit, but it seems like it doesn't want to be. But we can scroll. It's possible to scroll. Yeah, so here you see the response. It's an empty array. So that's sort of what we want and what we expect. And if we try to post a question, post, we'll add a JSON body, which should look something like we had topic. We have an alternative one. Yellow. So if I post this, I got an error. Unexpected character. I'm not sure that was it might be the error, but at least it is an error. 3, 4, comma. Should we try it again? Yeah, so then it returns the object I sent in with a generated ID. This should retrieve that object. If we do another one, then it adds that question, generates an ID for us, and this one should now hopefully return both. So yeah, that's kind of cool. Yeah, I'm not sure if we need to continue on this example. I think you get sort of an idea of how you can create this API with Spring Boot now, and yeah, it's sort of up to you to explore that a little bit more. So maybe you have any questions? Anything you would like to ask about? No? Yeah. Should we say that we're fine? Okay. So yeah, thanks for coming and watching us. Yep.
Ještě jednou já za sebe děkuji, že jste přišli, a kdybyste měli nějaké otázky, tak určitě se nebojte nás zastavit do stolečku, my tady ještě nějaký čas budeme. Takže klidně, kdybyste si chtěli na něco zeptat, něco vám nebylo jasné, tak určitě se nebojte. Ještě jsem takto chtěla poděkovat na závěr fakultě řízení a informatiky, doufám, že to říkám správně, že to má být ve slovenštině jinak, každopádně takto za pozvání a velmi se spolupráci vážíme, takže budu vám jinak držet palce ve studiu a když se rozhodnete jednou pracovat nebo se už někdo pracuje, tak neváhejte se klidně ozvat. Díky moc.